President Donald Trump has signed a major executive order withdrawing the United States from a controversial United Nations forum that he says promotes a global diversity, equity and inclusion reparations agenda. On January the 7th, 2026, President Donald Trump issued an executive order directing the United States to withdraw from the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, a body established to elevate issues affecting people of African heritage worldwide. According to US officials, the decision was prompted by what they describe as the forum's advocacy for race-based policies and a global reparations agenda, positions the Trump administration says conflict with the US Constitution's Equal Protection Clause and American values. The administration previously accused the forum of advancing racial grievances and having victim-based social policies. US officials also argued that the UN body violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. State Department spokesperson Tommy Pigott declared that America will no longer lend its credibility to racist organizations. The United States is proudly withdrawing from racist organizations such as this forum. He added, radical activists who embrace DEI ideology and seek to compel the United States to adopt policies mandating race-based wealth redistribution in organizations such as the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent will no longer be entertained. The UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent was set up to address issues including racial inequality, discrimination, and historical injustices. Critics in Washington have taken particular aim at agenda items they claim to go beyond traditional diplomacy, including proposals for financial compensation for descendants of slavery and colonialism.
What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Today we're going to talk about reparations, and we're going to clear some things up, because FBA are under the impression that only African Americans are due reparations. They're also under the impression that continental Africans and Caribbeans are trying to steal their reparations, which, for the life of me, I have absolutely no idea where they learned that from. But that's in fact what they believe. Therefore, they want to delineate for the purposes of receiving their reparations from the United States government solely. And want to make sure that no one else gets the money due to them, right? But the misunderstanding that they're having, the lack of the comprehension skills of history, right, that they have, they don't seem to understand that all Africans, including the continent of Africa, is due reparations from European powers. You see, reparations from the United States government is not the only reparations we African Americans are due. You see, before the United States of America was formed, all right, we were enslaved by European powers, the British, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Spanish. These are other nations in Europe that enslaved us, financed and enslaved us for hundreds of years before the Europeans, who were tasked with producing the products for Europe, utilizing the African slaves, decided to rebel because they didn't want to pay the taxes to the crown and form the country called America. So it is not just America that owes us reparations. It's England, it's France, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and various other European nations that owe us reparations, right? Now, all Africans are owed reparations. All Caribbeans, all South Americans and Central American Africans are owed reparations equally. If you speak English, you are owed reparations from the English. If you speak Spanish and French, you are owed reparations from France and Portugal and Spain. You must understand that reparations is not as simple as America cutting a check and giving it to African Americans, as there are many different actors who owe us reparations. Now, who is leading the charge for reparations for us African Americans? These are pan-African organizations, not FBA. FBA is doing absolutely nothing. That organization, the society, based off what right-wing Christian conservatives has labeled you, societies, right? Organization, not a lineage, because the lineage is African American. Your lineage is your DNA. It has nothing to do with soil, has nothing to do with nationality, has nothing to do with your ethnicity. It's who is your DNA, which is deeper and more complicated and is more it is a fact. Your DNA is your lineage, where you come from. You don't come from slavery. You don't come from America. You come from Africa because you are African. The people that were placed into the transatlantic slave trade were Africans, okay? Not some fictitious indigenous group of people that you guys made up. Because if you are in fact believe that you are a fictitious group of pretendians, then you are not due reparations at all. Because that's not for you. It's for Africans who were enslaved. It's for Africans who were brought over here and enslaved for hundreds of years. That's who reparation is for. Now, Pan-Africans are the ones pushing for reparations. Not only are we pushing for reparations, but we are also pushing for compensation from those African countries that participated, especially because those families, right? Some of those kings, some of those like institutions or tribes still exist that have acknowledged their participation in the transatlantic slave trade. And those people who are the leaders of those institutions have already openly apologized to African Americans, African Caribbeans, and Afro-Latinos for their part in the transatlantic slave trade. So that portion of apology is already over. And they have already started to, in their own way, compensate us by giving us pathways to citizenship, and in some cases, depending on what country you are genetically connected to, your real lineage, when you do your DNA, your real lineage, you are due citizenship, and in some cases, land, depending on which country and what program you are part of, right? Or ease of access to get, for your birthright or whatnot, right? Now, we are, as African Americans, we are part of the 6th region, a recognized group of Africans, us, African Americans, a recognized group of Africans, right, by the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament. You see, Pan-Africanism is not just a bunch of dudes on the internet. Pan-Africanism is an ideology, an umbrella branch of many different governments, heads of state, and non-governmental organizations that are coming together, right, in order to work together economically and socially to lift all African people globally together. That's what Pan-Africanism is. A lot of you FBAs have no idea what Pan-Africanism is because you think Umar Johnson is the Prince of Pan-Africanism. That's your problem. Y'all think Umar Johnson represents Pan-Africanism. Umar Johnson, he says a lot of good Pan-African words because he's a roving preacher, right? That's what he is. He's a roving preacher. He just used Pan-Africanism as his medium instead of Christianity. He does the same thing and takes advantage of people the same way, right? He is a grifter. He does not represent true Pan-Africanism or what Pan-Africanism is actually doing, okay? So I'm going to make sure I put this information here so you can see it at the end of this video. But understand, it's the Pan-Africans and the ACLU filled with Pan-Africans and allies, because in fact, we do have allies that are not African. There are, in fact, allies who are not African at all who consider themselves Pan-African simply because they support the unity of black people. There are, in fact, people who are not black who support black unity in economic upliftment. That is true. Whether your feelings will let you believe it or not, okay? So FBA, the group who says they want to delineate, are delineating into nothing but round-robin circles of echo chambers online, complaining about them not getting reparations and not wanting to share. Now, here's another thing that you guys got to understand. If you utilize Tariq Nasheed's definition of FBA, right? If you use the logic of you getting your check cut based off your connection to, your ancestors being North American slaves, right? Then there are many white Americans who have at up to 20% of African DNA in them because of what their great-great-great-granddaddy did, right? Who also have a claim because, in fact, because of what their great-great-great-granddaddy did, they have a great-great-great-grandmama and a great-grandmama who was a slave. Therefore, by the logic of FBA, many white Americans would qualify for reparations under FBA's idea. Many white Americans would get reparations because under the law, they would fit the profile of somebody whose ancestors were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade here in North America, right? So Tariq Nasheed and his FBA would rather have white people get a piece of that extra reparations rather than their black brothers and sisters who were also enslaved by that same European. They don't want them to get a piece of reparations. Now, FBA also, this is the stupidest thing. This is how I know that FBA is just highly uneducated. Like when I say highly uneducated, I mean highly uneducated, completely and totally unaware of the real world and how things really work. You see, FBA is under the impression that Africans want to steal their reparations simply because they're calling for reparations from all European nations involved, right, on behalf of us and all Caribbeans and Latinos. You see, the only way to get reparations is to have heads of state and to have giant organizations that have enough money to put pressure on Europeans to force them to give us reparations. There has to be a consequence for Europeans not to give it to us in order to pressure them to do it. Because if we don't put pressure on them, they're not going to do it. African Americans don't have enough power to force multiple nations to give us reparations. We have to be backed by nations. We have to be backed by NGOs who have substantial amount of money for lawyers, for legislation, to pass bills, to sanction those European countries to say, if you don't work with us now and pay us back in some form or fashion, when we rise and we get to a certain point, you can't come to us for business. You can't come and get our resources. You can't come and reap the benefits of the abundance of Africa because you don't treat our people correctly. You didn't give us compensation before. That is the only way. A giant can only beat a giant. If you are a peasant, no matter how much money you have as a peasant, if you're by yourself, you cannot beat these giants. So we have to have nations on our behalf lobbying for us to get those reparations. That's what pan-Africanism is doing. I understand the FBA don't pay attention to news. They don't watch the news. They don't watch international news. They don't know. A lot of them didn't even know there was such thing called Pan-African Parliament. They don't know anything about the AU, right? And if they do, they only heard the corrupt portions about how it must be ran by the Europeans. They quickly go to a victim mentality and just say any business any African nation is doing, it must be in a subservient slave manner. When in fact, African people, right, just like African Americans, we are intelligent, we are strong, and once we realize what's going on, we do what we got to do to get what we're supposed to get. That's just what it is, right? So African nations, right, who have already, like I said, have already apologized. Those tribes and those few families that have participated in the transatlantic slave trade have already apologized to African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans on camera in their face. They apologize for their portion of, or their part into the transatlantic slave trade. So we as African Americans, our job is to forgive them and accept the apology. The same way we have clearly accepted the apology from that white man who stole us, raped us, ate us, and continue to terrorize us to this day. But somehow we done forgave them because we don't mind marrying them. We don't mind hanging out with them. We don't mind becoming best friends with them. We don't mind working with them. We don't mind going to their countries and vacationing. We don't mind doing any of that stuff. We don't mind fellowshipping with Europeans. We don't mind doing any of that stuff. But somehow FBA have a unrational hate for Africans who played a small portion in the transatlantic slave trade, right? Because they were manipulated the same way the Native Americans were manipulated to destroy each other because of the tricks of the European. You see, that's why education is important, because once you educate yourself and understand the complexities of the past, you'll understand what's happening in the present and what we have to do in the future. FBA didn't pay attention in school. You can clearly tell by their lack of comprehension, by their lack of having the ability to write complete sentences, by their lack of understanding anything that anybody with common sense says, by their lack of being able to comprehend today's politics, right? So FBA, who supports Donald Trump because they're Black MAGA, FBA, right, who shits on the Democrats all the time, right, without shitting on the Republicans. I don't mind shitting on the Democrats. I shit on the Democrats, but I also shit on the Republicans. If you notice, FBA have 0 words for Republicans. Nothing. 0, zilch, because that is not who they're focused on, right? But the person they allowed, because they are that 20% that didn't vote for Kamala, They're the 20% that didn't vote for common sense. They allowed Donald Trump and their white neo-Nazis to get into office, or they supported the white neo-Nazis getting into office. And just now, Donald Trump made sure that African Americans and African diasporas do not get reparations if he can help it, as he took America out of the program that was being placed by the African Union and the United Nations, because European nations are prepared, some of them are prepared to do something about reparations. Do you know why European nations are prepared to do something about reparations? Because Europeans are right now in an existential crisis of extinction, and their economies and their large economies are going down, so they need Africa, and they can no longer take advantage of Africa like they used to. Therefore, they have to change their foreign policy to be more fair and have equity in Africa. So one of those things that they need to do is change their relationship, which that means when African Union says, hey, we want reparations, you need to do something, they are ready to capitulate. But you see, America doesn't want to capitulate, and not at least the Republicans, the ones who these FBAs support, or the ones who these FBA let walk right by them into the seats of power as they sat on the couch and did absolutely nothing while complaining about the Democrats, as they are continuing to this day complaining about the Democrats while disregarding everything that's happening with the Republican Party, as if the Democrats are even in charge or could do anything. Because if they knew anything about American politics, they will understand that because of the actions of themselves, and those white folks who didn't want to vote for that black lady, we now are being ruled by an authoritarian government that has all intentions on disenfranchising black people in every way possible. That's what's happening. But you don't hear FBA talking about that, because they're only focused on talking about other black people. That's the only thing they talk about, is other black people, because their sole focus, their tunnel vision, is other black people and them not getting reparations that they're not going to get from the government that they support or allowed to get into power. But everybody, be clear. African Americans, not because FBA don't represent African Americans. FBA are the weak link of African Americans. They're the xenophobic hate group who are emotional, right? Because somebody may have called them a name once before. And because of that, they're willing to throw all the progress of African Americans under the bus for their feelings. While pan-Africans, right, which means black unity, by the way. So if you're against pan-Africanism, you're declaring you're against the unified body of Africans. You're against unity. That means you are pro-separatist. You are pro-tribalistic. You are an ethno-nationalist. You are against unity. You are the enemy of black empowerment. You're the enemy of black progress, whether you know it or not. That's why I go so hard on FBA, because FBA is an institution created by white supremacy to benefit white supremacy, to trick unintelligent, unknowledgeable black people into hating their brothers and sisters instead of uniting with their brothers and sisters. So without further ado, let me put some information here so you can understand the only people campaigning for reparations for all of us are Pan-Africans. That's it. No other group outside of Pan-Africans are fighting for reparations. And if we ever do get reparations, in any form or fashion, it'll be because of Pan-Africans and us unifying with our brothers and sisters on the continent to come together in numbers to force European nations to pay what they owe us before we change our relationship on a global scale. Anyway, that's all I got to say. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn some tea-tongue. I'm out.
My people. So something historic just happened on the African continent. And no, you will not hear about it on the evening news. For the first time ever, African nations have united to declare something the world has avoided for over a century. Colonialism was a crime with victims, a crime with consequences, and a crime that still shapes our world today. This week in Algeria, leaders from across the continent gathered with one message. We're not asking for favors, we're demanding justice. They want colonialism formally recognized under international law. They want the return of stolen artifacts and cultural treasures. And yes, they want reparations, not symbolic apologies, not museum loans, real, tangible restitution for centuries of extraction and exploitation.
The demand for reparations is not an attempt to rewrite history or to continue the cycle of victimization. It's a call to recognize the undeniable truth and right the wrongs that have gone unpunished.
And my people, the timing is not accidental because Africa has leverage now. Africa has unity now. And Africa has something the world can no longer ignore: a clear moral case backed by history, evidence, and global momentum. For years, former colonial powers have offered regret, remorse, and well-polished speeches, but never accountability. But now, Africa is saying the era of apologies is over. The bill is due.
Slave trade must be recognized as the greatest crime against humanity. As the African champion on reparations, Ghana intends to introduce a motion in this August body to that effect. More than 12.5 million Africans were forcibly taken against their will and transported to create wealth for the powerful Western nations. We must demand reparations for the enslavement of our people and the colonization of our land that resulted in the theft of our natural resources, as well as the looting of artifacts and other items of cultural heritage that have yet to be returned in total.
This moment isn't just about the past. It's about rewriting Africa's future, how the world sees it, how we negotiate, and how generations to come understand their power. But my people, the challenges ahead are real. And in order for this moment to move beyond another demand and become real, tangible change, 3 key things must happen. And I break them all down in an all-new episode on Pan-Africanism TV on YouTube. So watch the full breakdown and let me know what you think in the comments. Should Africa keep pushing until colonialism is formally recognized as a crime with restitution, no matter how long it takes? Let's have the conversation together. And hey, share this video to let someone know Africa is awakening.
The next order of priority is citizenship, starting with the Afro-descendants from the 6th region who have already returned to various countries. At the AU ECOSOC pre-summit ahead of last February's 38th Ordinary Summit of the Heads of State in Addis Ababa, the State of the African Diaspora Ambassador and President of the Ethiopian World Federation Local in Shashamane, Ms. Jasmine Rowe, informed the summit of the deplorable and inexcusable fact that after 80 years, some Rastafarians on the land granted by Emperor Haile Selassie still do not have citizenship. This and many other problems plague repatriates in many AU member states. For this reason, I am now submitting to the Commission and AU ECOSOC reports prepared by Ambassador Jasmine Rowe, by Obemfo Obadeli Bakari Kambon, PhD of the Abibi Fahodi Think Tank Consortium in Ghana.
The right for African American descendants of slaves to receive federal government cash reparations is as clear as America's original sin. The necessity and need for reparations was perfectly articulated more than 2 decades ago by academic and author Dr. Claude Anderson.
If you don't get reparations, black folk, you're through in this country. Let me be that very specific for you. You see, what's happening to black Americans is that black Americans have been systematically socially engineered into the lowest level of a real-life monopoly game. You do not own and control a sufficient amount of anything to be competitive in America. And you've been marginalized now for 400 years. You're getting ready to be buried. You can get buried underneath a whole broad groups of ambiguous groupings. That's everything from culture groups, language groups, and gender groups. You're going down. It's no longer an issue. You better get reparations and get it fast.
Anderson is correct, and 23 years after his speech, structural racism in the United States remains clearly evidenced within the criminal justice system, policing, imprisonment, healthcare, housing, and so on. This reality for black people in the United States has led to mass protests over the last few years, including solidarity protests around the world. Essentially, millions around the planet empathize with the demand for reparations. That solidarity, however, stops at the doors of the White House and President Joe Biden. Despite promising to have the backs of black Americans after using the black vote to win the presidency, Biden has done nothing to fulfill the promise. Don't forget that reparations and defunding the police were popular topics around election time, but since winning office, Biden has predictably turned his back on black America. And, of course, Biden famously authored the '94 Crime Bill, a law widely viewed as paving the way for increased mass incarceration, devastating black communities already disproportionately impacted and targeted by the racist criminal justice system. The reality is, Joe Biden and the Democrats could do more, as they have done for many other groups, but simply choose not to. Reparations have been paid to Jews, Japanese Americans, Alaskans, Native Americans, and even slave owners. While states like California have finally begun to explore the possibility of reparations, surely in 2023 the real drive should be from the federal government. As Joe Biden seeks a second term in office very soon, and once more, the Democrats and liberal media will start to hype up reparations, but that is as far as things will go. Biden may well win the presidency once more, but reparations will be no closer to becoming reality. Many would like to be proved wrong, but are increasingly wise to Biden's tactics of speaking like an ally while acting as an adversary. Put simply, if Biden was going to do something for Black America, he'd have done it already. The sad truth is that America has a limitless budget for war, but so far refuses to pay a single dollar to the very communities that built the country from the ground up.
I think when we demand what was stolen from Africa, we call them artifacts. Sure, some were artifacts, but not all of it were artifacts. A lot of what the white people stole from us is our spiritual heritage that they use now to govern us. They wanted the golden stool so desperately they were prepared to go to war for it because they knew the power of the golden stool. So I think for the next 3 days, as we continue to explain and define what reparations are for us, we should remember that when we come to material reparations, which are the physical things that were taken from our continent, we should remember that our national altars, as we sit here, still lie in Europe, except for Eswatini, for they never captured their national altars. That's why they are the only country amongst us which still keeps the Queen Mother.
And one of the other things that were pointed out to me, there's been much talk about migration back to Africa, physical migration back to Africa. After traveling through Africa and discussing that particular phase of the problem with many African diplomats and statesmen, I came away with the conclusion that they would be happy to welcome our people back. But at the same time, many of them suggested that it would be wiser for our people to work, since our people have made the contribution in this particular country that has made this country what it is. We have a stake in it. We have something coming here. And it would be wiser for us to force this country to live up to what it professes to represent in its constitution and in its so-called beautiful declarations of independence and other things. And those who want to migrate back, well and good. Those who want to stay here, well and good. But the migration back to Africa should be, if you notice, the Jews in this country have stayed in this country physically. But their migration back to Israel has been a philosophical migration, a cultural migration, a psychological migration, meaning that they have linked hands spiritually with Israel while remaining here physically. But this spiritual link with Israel has given them the prestige and the incentive that has enabled them to enhance their position here politically, economically, socially, and otherwise. And those who are here help the Jews who are in Israel, and those who are in Israel help the Jews who are here.
We really have to think about looking at Africana studies and utilizing an African way of thinking and educating young folks from the first grade all the way up to college about an African way of thinking. We have to decolonize our minds. Our minds have been colonized by European thinking. And so you go to, leave from here to Togo and you go to Nigeria, and the Togolese know little about the Nigerians. The Nigerians know little about the Kenyans. The Kenyans know almost nothing about the Ethiopians. We don't have a pan-Africanist idea and thinking, but those same people can go to the United States, can go to France, can go to England and tell you all about it. And the same is true in the diaspora. We have the same colonial slave mentality that you go to the average person in the United States. They can't tell you much about what's going on in Burkina Faso, what's going on in Sierra Leone, or even name all of the countries. I think those are the key things to transform our way of thinking and doing, is that we implement a new form of education that is a Pan-Africanist education from the beginning all the way up to college.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
So we're here today.
Yes.
In African Parliament.
Yes.
It's the fifth PRM
Youth Symposium.
Youth Symposium.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to get these leaders accountable. As a young African man, I'm mad at the fact that we do not have jobs as young Africans.
Yeah.
We are highly unemployed. The fact that we are being led by dry, old, aging politicians who know nothing and who don't even care about the future. You have someone with 80, 90 years old leading us. Where are they leading us to?
The grave.
It's our time now.
Hi.
How you doing?
Get rid of my jacket so you see my whole
All right. Let's start with the drip check like the young people would. Let's start with the shoes. Check the shoes. Check the shoes there. Huh? Check the bag there.
Yes.
Huh? Look at you.
Yes.
All right. Now tell us, why are you here?
We are here to be heard.
Yes.
To be seen.
Yes.
For them to know we're just not numbers.
Yes.
We're not just data. We're not just insights. Apart from the very evident governance gap.
Yeah.
We see nothing in us in them.
Yeah.
Cameroon and Uganda, I've seen the most shocking thing where the presidents were actually running their campaigns using statues. They're so old, so they cannot even be on the streets to run.
Yeah.
And they talk about 10 years, 20 years from now, but they are messing with our future. We need this sits in the now to decide about our future.
In South Africa, we say Amandla, which means await.
What do you say?
We say Amandla.
Amantha.
Await.
Await.
Yeah.
When I get a chance to attend the AU summit, which sits in Ethiopia, I have only one question to ask the members who have been sitting there before.
What question?
What have you been discussing for so long? What have you been talking about for so long? To the extent that some African countries are still fighting each other up to now. Yes, what have they been talking?
Or discussing?
Yes.
Africa has been the provider. If you look at Europe, Europe cannot survive without Africa. One situation that people don't realize, post-World War, when the US came up with the Marshall Plan, what they don't tell you is that the contribution through exploitation of African minerals was actually the biggest funder of the European Recovery Plan, ERP, aka the Marshall Plan. US contributed $13 billion, which is now present day $175 billion, which, by the way, the American taxpayer must be paid back. Nobody's asking for that money back. But what they don't tell you is that Africa, through exploitation of its resources by the Europeans, was actually a much, much bigger contribution to the European recovery post-World War II. Nobody talks about that. Why does such a continent that did so much to help Europe recover continue to be so poor? Let's be realistic here. Let's not talk about peanuts. Africa does not need the aid. What we need is for those who are exploiting Africa to stop. Africa has everything it needs. If Africa could have contributed as much as it did to the recovery of Europe post-World War II, why wasn't Africa equally developed?
In humility and brokenness, to repent for the sins of the leaders in Africa, and in particular, the sin of selling our own brothers and sisters into slavery. This great sin brought untold pain and misery to millions of people of African descent, and judgment to the African people who remained on the continent. The grave sin of slavery scattered our people all over the face of the earth, where they have suffered great deprivations and loss. If it were not for the part that our African kings and chiefs played in the slave trade, this evil trade could not have survived. Therefore, On behalf of all the African leaders, past and present, all of them, I acknowledge the part that we played in this tragedy, and today we ask for forgiveness. We seek forgiveness for the great pain and loss that the myopic and selfish decisions of our leaders caused our brothers and sisters of African descent around the world, and we ask their forgiveness. We plead the blood of Jesus to cleanse us all from this great sin and release us from the spiritual, mental, emotional, and economic bondage it brought. Today, we reopen the door to our brothers and sisters of African descent to return home to the continent of Africa, the land of their ancestry, and the spiritual homeland of all African people. We welcome you home with open arms as brothers and sisters, and pray that we can close the door to the dark past and work towards a better future. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
At this point, particularly to apologize deeply on behalf of the chiefs and people of Gold Coast and Ghana for the atrocities, the cruelty, the inhuman treatment that were committed 400 years ago by my ancestors during the Atlantic slave trade, where over 400 years ago, millions of our brothers and sisters were captured, sold, and transported under inhumane and cruel circumstances through Elmina Castle across to the Caribbeans and to the New World. On behalf of the chiefs and people of Ghana, I do render unqualified apology, deep from the bottom of our hearts. Deep from our bottom of our hearts. But one thing that I want you to be aware of, it was not without resistance. Some of our chiefs did fought and resisted. Some of our people did fought and resisted. But we are fighting a losing battle against a stronger army. People with guns, and we had no guns. They deceived us with liquor and all other temptations.
People of Ghana and of Africa and of the Cebu states, they not apologize to the whole world in camera. We apologize to our brothers and sisters in the diaspora for the roles that the chiefs played in the past in this slave trade saga. We apologize. We apologize that Africa is for Africa, it's for all of us. So he donated 5,000 acres of land for all, our brothers and sisters who, for one reason or the other, became victims of the slave trade, to consider coming back home to live. So it is very true. His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo wouldn't lie. It is very, very true. Nana openly donated the land to Africans who are victims of the slave trade to come and then partake, to come and live, to come and stay.
I know you would like to know how do we go about getting this land? I know you are thinking of settling down in Ghana, in Africa. How do we acquire this land, Nana?
Well, it's very simple and straightforward. First of all, you have to be African descent. you have to prove that you are someone of an African descent. Number two, we will take you through a very short orientation. We're trying to build a new community of us. So you need to know some of our customs. A little check on you, your background. We have to know if you don't have any issues, bordering criminality or some basic checks. We'll take you through that. And then, right away, bingo, you get your land. And then you choose to do whatever you want to do with it. But we're encouraging residential settlement. We also have land for industrial purposes. So, number one, of very importance, is you have to prove that you are an African. And then you are in the States, you are in Jamaica, you are in Barbados, you are in Trinidad and Tobago. Anywhere that you will find yourself today, it's as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Immediately you qualify for the land. Sharing the message in the world about Okodachi Amanfi, the man of Asebu's intention and good ideas to help the African family with free passes of land. I would like to thank the President for doing us this honor. And on the now, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, they don't have no excuse to stay out. It is time for them to come home.
Around the altar of the Most High, happily soul that find a rest in the heavenly Father's breast.
I'm speaking as a Somali, a country and a people who have suffered for over 30 years exactly because of the same conditions in the Sudan and because the African Union and the African people did not come to the help of my own people. So I urge everyone here to support the people of Sudan. Number two, creating peace is a political project. To be told that politics and peace have nothing to do with one another is an illusion. There are two kinds of politics. A politics that constructs peace, constructs welfare, constructs development, and brings people together. This is what we are all about in this chamber. And then there is politics that divides people. But to say that politics has no place in peacemaking and tolerance is an illusion that the Pan-African Parliament should not accept. Second, the United Arab Emirates as a country, not as an ambassador or individuals, but as a country, is comparable, let me repeat that, is comparable to those who supported apartheid and those who supported Ian Smith in what was previously Rhodesia. So we should deal with that country exactly as we dealt with supporters of apartheid and supporters of Ian Smith. And therefore we should sanction them. We should take them out of the African Union. We should not invite into our forums until they come to their senses. Finally, here's my recommendation, very briefly. Don't invite criminal regimes to our midst, to our forums. Second, sanction the UAE from all of African Union forums. Thank you, sir.
First of all, can we clap for him again? A round of applause. Yes. Secondly, we missed you, Professor, in this chamber. I think the last 2 sessions or so. We really missed you. I can see you are back with your vibrance as usual.
I had work in Mogadishu. Thank you.
Thank you. Please keep your good work up.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's pan-Africanism or nothing.